I don't have the money, so then they don't go pursue something new. I don't have the knowledge. I don't go, by doing that, it's saying, hey, I don't have the resources. Well, guess what? If you're resourceful, if you know how to go out and find the resources, resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. And so I would put myself in a position where I'm asking myself questions. How can I? Right? Empowering type questions. How could I do this? How could I solve that problem? How can I find the money? How could I get the additional time? How could I learn? Right? And there's answers to those questions that are very efficient ways to gain access to knowledge, time, resources, money, all those things. But you got to be resourceful. Right? And you have to focus on the resourcefulness first. And if you're resourceful and you approach every problem and every question with resourcefulness, you will find the resources and you will be able to solve a lot of problems and create this awesome momentum that positions you for big success down the road.
Before we bring on our guest, I wanted to talk just a little bit about something that I've been hearing a lot from hosts. I keep on hearing the same thing. I know my website isn't converting, but I can't afford $8,000 on an agency to rebuild it. Here's the thing. You're letting all these marketing strategies, you're driving traffic, and you're putting it all to work. But if your site isn't really built to convert, you're basically lighting your energy and money on fire. And even if you could afford an agency build, every time you want to test something or make a change, you're having to pay them again. You can't iterate, you can't test, and you really can't improve on things. You don't need a custom $10,000 website to get the conversion rates that really matter. You just need the right platform. That's why I built Craft to Stays. It's purpose-built for short-term rentals and designed from the ground up to help you drive more direct bookings. You can finally turn that traffic into bookings. And you can keep on testing and improving as you learn. And you can make changes all on the platform. You don't need to learn something new. So if you need some help or you want to get started, go ahead and go to crafttostays.co and start your free trial. Now let's bring on our guests and dive deep into hospitality and marketing. Hey folks, welcome back to the Book Seller Show, the show where we bring in top operators to discuss hospitality, operations, and direct bookings. On today's show, I have Tim Bratz. He owns over 2,800 doors, value at over $350 million. He walks us through how he's grown from being an intern to now scaling a multifamily investment firm. We also dig into what he's seen throughout all the different waves in real estate, why he's moving some of his units into short-term rentals, and why now commercial real estate operators are now motivated to partner up with short-term rental operators. So without further ado, let's bring in Tim. Tim, welcome to the show.
What's up, Gil? Good. Thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. We typically focus on a lot of folks kind of in the vacation rental, short-term rental space, and you come from a totally different world. Actually, not totally. You're actually pretty adjacent to it. But I come from a different perspective, so I would definitely want to dive directly into today's show and really get to know kind of how you built your portfolio to what it is today and some of the strategies that you've been deploying on your side. So maybe to kind of start us off, Tim, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally. It's where I grew up and went to college 03 to 07 and saw everybody making money in real estate. And so I thought, if all these people are making money in real estate, I could probably do this too. And so in 2007, when I graduated from college, I jumped into real estate. And I thought you got involved in real estate by becoming like a real estate agent. And so my brother was living in New York City at the time. I moved out to New York City. I got a real estate license and somehow lined up and placed it with a commercial brokerage that did a lot of leasing for offices and retail and did a lot of investment sales as well. And closed on some transactions that were just simple leases. And I remember thinking, I'll give you an example. There was a falafel shop in Greenwich Village that I brokered, and it was 400 square feet. And they signed a lease for $10,000 a month on a 12-year lease term with 4% annual escalations. And I remember doing the math on this, thinking, this landlord's going to make like $2 million on this over the course of the next 10, 12 years for doing something at one point in time. And he had 8 retail spaces and another 10 stories of apartments above it. And I remember thinking, I'm on the wrong side of the coin. I need to be owning real estate, not just brokering it. And so, love New York, but I wanted a little bit more lifestyle type structure, and so heard some good things about Charleston, South Carolina. And so I moved down to Charleston, South Carolina in 2008 and kind of began my investing journey at that time. And so I show up to the party and everybody's running out the back door because the whole market collapses in October of 2008. And so fortunately I didn't buy anything with like a stated income loan or like just no document loans. and get over leveraged and go bankrupt. So I learned a lot from watching other people at that time. And fortunately, right when I was about to start investing, dude, all the prices started just plummeting, and properties were hitting the market for $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000. That you're like, oh man, like how do you lose on something like this? And I remember thinking, like, I want to go and buy everything. The issue was nobody was loaning money to a 23-year-old kid who'd never done a deal before in the worst real estate housing crash in the history of the country, right? And so you had to get creative. And I bought my first house. I was like, well, who's giving me money? And the only person giving me money at the time was MasterCard. And so I asked for a credit limit increase, and they gave it to me. I asked for $100,000. They only gave me $15,000. But you got to ask big, right? And they gave me $15,000. I found the cheapest house in the MLS, which was listed at like $25,000. And we went back and forth, and I got it for $14,000. And so I wrote a balance transfer check, brought it to closing, closed on that property, literally did all the work to it myself, and turned around, sold it about 100 days later, and made $13,000 on it net. And I just remember, like, this was the biggest check I'd ever earned up to that point in my life. And I remember thinking, like, everybody's running from real estate and saying, don't do it. Like, it obviously works, right? It just must have been a bad business plan. So I just did more of that. I did it again, plugged into some of the local real estate investors associations, and I started meeting people who had money. And they said, hey, I got a full-time job, but I have this 401k that I can self-direct, or I have some cash, or I have a line of credit on my house that I can access and tap into. You go and do the work, you go and find the deals, you go and operate those, and then I'll bring the cash. And then we came up with equity splits. And, I bought about 10 houses over the course of the next 2 years, and just on long-term leases. And wasn't rich by any means, but I had enough residual income coming in that it exceeded all my business expenses and my personal expenses, and left me with about an extra $1,000 a month. And I remember thinking, like, I got this figured out, and I wasn't rich, but I was technically financially free if you go by that definition of it. And so, that staying in that lane, and then found my first apartment building, came across an 8-unit building in 2012, and just the efficiencies of going into multifamily really resonated with me. I love the idea of going to one property instead of 8 properties. I love to look at one foundation, one roof instead of 8 foundations or 8 roofs, right? Paying one utility bill or one tax bill instead of 8. And it was just much more efficient and less wasteful than the single family stuff that I was doing at the time. And so I went heavy into multifamily with a couple of partners. They brought the money, I did the work, and over the course of the next 3 years, turned about $1 million into 140 apartments. And that partnership kind of faded. They wanted to take their money off the table, didn't want to contribute anything else, and wanted me to then go out and get the money and do all the work. And I only had a third of the business. And so it just didn't resonate. We didn't see eye to eye. We decided to liquidate those 140 doors. And I was able to then go and do my own thing. So turned that into a flipping business, and I went into flipping houses in order to kind of keep food on the table. We were flipping somewhere between 80 to 120 houses a year for the next 3 years, and then started a turnkey business out of that. They were mostly flips that were turnkey rental properties. So I'd buy it, fix it all up, put management in place, and then we'd sell that to somebody who just wants to buy a house in their IRA, or somebody who wants to buy a house just with cash and have the residual income, but they didn't want to do any of the work. And so we built up a nice little turnkey business, started a management company. I was back in Cleveland, Ohio at this time, had moved back to Cleveland, and that was all great. And I was still buying some apartments, some smaller apartments, and I was signing on loans for a couple other guys that I knew, or raising money and bringing capital to a couple of different deals that were down in Georgia. And, sat back on vacation, I think it was 2017, looking at my net worth and my balance sheet and realizing like 90% of my net worth came from these apartments. That was like 10% of my time, because all I was doing is signing on loans and raising capital for them. And then I had a big chunk of the equity. And I came back from vacation. I went to my team. I was like, we're not flipping any more houses, right? Shut it down. My acquisitions guy, instead of acquiring single family rentals, you're going to acquire apartments for our own portfolio. My project manager, instead of renovating houses, you're going to be renovating apartments. And my dispo guy, instead of selling houses, you're going to be asset managing apartments. And that's what we ended up doing. And in 2018, I bought a little over 1,000 doors. 2019, I bought 2,000 apartments. 2020, bought another 1,000, 1,200 apartments. And in 2021, I reached my peak of the most doors I've ever owned at one time, which was just shy of 5,000 doors. Wow. And we've transacted on probably 7,000. And that was great. And built up. And then all of a sudden, the rug got pulled out in 2022 when rates started skyrocketing and insurance premiums skyrocketed and labor costs skyrocketed. Supply chain still messed up. And energy costs have been going up, and so we've been taking a lot of arrows for the past few years. I've scaled my portfolio down to about 2,800 doors today, and still worth about $350 million of portfolio value. And I own a big chunk of that. My team has a piece of the equity. Some of our investors have a little piece of the equity as well. And but it's been a lot of navigating some rough waters over the past few years. And one of the ways that we've been able to do that is by taking a chunk of our units at these apartment complexes, converting them into short-term rentals, and being able to juice the revenue at the property level by doing so.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that the thread that I'm kind of picking up is that there's this, like you mentioned, like this constant navigating, there's constant like pivot to figure out how do you fit in the current market, because it's almost a combination of your skill set, the resources / capital, and where the market is going. You're constantly calibrating against these three criterias there, because even if you did have the skill, but the market's not in the right place, you shouldn't be going there either way. So you're almost as if you can't really say, I'm the multifamily guy and I'm always going to be doing this, or I'm the fix and flip guy and I'm always going to be doing this. You had to kind of like navigate that through. Is that kind of how you felt throughout this?
Yeah, I think there's this when I look back at my career in real estate, there's like this, you graduate each year, right? You go to a different grade kind of a thing. If you're doing the exact same thing that you were doing, 15 years ago, and you got the same problems that you had 15 years ago, like there's a bigger problem. It's you not growing, right? It's you not asking better questions about your business and how to refine and how to improve and how to grow and scale. And by the way, growth and scale isn't always adding more doors. That's not the case. Like we've refined considerably and reduced the amount of doors, but our doors got better, right? We have higher quality doors, we have higher occupancy, more revenue right now than we even did back then, because we had a bunch of value add and a bunch of new construction and a bunch of like headache projects that didn't generate any revenue. And so when I say growth and when I say scale, I'm not just talking about obnoxious more of everything. That's not the goal, right? The goal to buying real estate isn't more. The goal to buying real estate is freedom. How do you get freedom from the real estate that you're purchasing? That needs to be the North Star that all of us are looking at all times for our own careers and our own businesses. And so I will say, like, I've gone through these graduated steps of, had a real estate life. Well, first I interned for a real estate company when I was in college, and then I had a painting business when I was in college, and then I got a real estate license when I got out of college, and then I started buying single family houses and flipping them, and I started wholesaling, and then I got into buying and holding single family houses, and then it got into small multi, and then medium-sized multi, and now larger multi. I have commercial properties, mixed-use properties, office, self-storage. I've had pretty much everything. I've done development, new construction, and all those things. In order to figure out, is this something where I want to really dive deeper and go heavier into? I would say 90% of my portfolio is multifamily, and that's definitely my focus, our highest and best use of our skill sets. But by doing some of the other things, we've sharpened the axe over and over and over again and continuously strengthened our positioning, where we're very creative on how to raise capital. We're very creative on how to structure deals. We're very creative on thinking outside the box of the norm of what's standard on revenue streams for a given property, and how to reduce expenses on the P&L in order to tighten up the net operating income at the end of the day.
Yeah. Back in 2019, and you probably can relate to this, maybe even earlier on, or in being inside of it, but in 2019, I binged probably 100 episodes of Bigger Pockets, and I would consume that stuff all the time. And Your story reminds me a lot of some of the really big successes from folks, and I think you might have been on the Bigger Pockets show.
Yep, I've been on a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what do you think made you so successful at ramping up from starting off from being that intern, being that realtor, and then pivoting so many times? Like what led you to the success that you had now? If you were to like boil it down to kind of the fundamentals.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's definitely some points of delineation in my journey that I can share in a second here. But I think the mindset is probably where it all comes from, right? I'm somebody who comes from a very blue collar family, right? I don't come from money, but I had a ton of support. I never knew, we always had food on the table. We're very, middle class. And didn't come from very adverse circumstances. I'm not an immigrant who came with $10 in their pocket and had to like build up something incredible, which I think is far more impressive, right? But like I was raised by a policeman and a teacher, right? And had a ton of support, had a ton of love, got good grades in school, thought that was the path that you should pursue, and realized like I'm not a good employee. I'm just not good at working for other people, and I don't like people telling me what to do. I remember, a college job, and this guy's like, I'm not. He was yelling at me. I was like, dude, F this, man. I don't need to be working for this clown. Like I can go and do this on my own if I wanted to, and that's what I ended up doing. And so I quickly realized I was not a good employee listening to other people, being told what to do, given marching orders and all that kind of stuff. So I needed to go and start my own business, and I tried to figure out what could that be. And I think what probably has separated my success is like I'm constantly asking and refining and reviewing and saying, is this what I really want? Is this really the best path to get there? Just because this is how it's always been done, is there a better way of doing that thing? And I ask myself really good questions. I think a lot of people make a statement like, I can't buy real estate because I don't have any money. Boom, that's a statement. There's a period at the end of it, and it stops thinking. I've said, hey, I don't have any money, but how could I get money? And by asking yourself a question, it gets your creative juices flowing and leads your mind down a path of more resourceful questions and eventually a better answer. And I've always done that. I've always asked myself, I've always questioned everything and thought, is this the best way of doing it? And because, I got into single family, or I got into brokering, and I quickly realized like there's a better path, right? I can earn residual income instead of having transactional income. That's where I want to be. So let's go into the ownership side. I bought single family. Oh, single family is great, but it's an addition play versus multifamily is a multiplication play, right? I'd rather be multiplying than adding. So I went heavy into multifamily. And, and just kind of improving the mindset that way and always asking and refining, is this the best path forward? Like now today I've taken a lot of my skill sets and my team's skill sets and our experience, and we've created a property management software called Smart Management, which is it's like Appfolio and Yardi and RealPage and Rent Manager and all these other ones that are out there that are very antiquated, older systems. They're okay for what they do, but they don't integrate with everything else. And I was like, why doesn't everything integrate? So we've taken a CRM with workflow management, with payment processing, with accounting, with property management, with communication, with digital signatures, and everything else, and put it into a singular platform with automations on top of it, with AI on top of it, and it smokes everything else on the marketplace. We use it in our own portfolio right now, but we'll be taking that out to the market, and we're developing a short-term rental management piece to it too. So that way, these multifamily owners and stuff can manage everything all in one place. So it's like I don't just allow the marketplace to dictate, what it should be, right? I don't allow other people to say, hey, this is what it is. This is what it's always been. This is what it's always going to be. I'm like, no, it can be better, right? And as an entrepreneur, like you look at things through a different lens and you go and solve problems. And the bigger the problems you solve for more people that you can help, the more money that you can make.
Yeah. How much do you feel like it's kind of reactive to where the market is versus like proactive and thinking about like, okay, the market's shifting in this area and I need to go chase forward? Like, how do you feel like as a founder? I feel like there's always this anxiety of like, am I in the right place? Should I be strengthening things, or should I be looking at the next step? And you're playing like almost like an offense defense constantly as a founder.
Yeah, I mean, I've been investing since 2000. Been in real estate since '05. Been investing since '09. Been in commercial real estate since 2012. And so there was a long period with the crazy financial collapse that happened in '08. After that, though, it was about 10 years of very steady, predictable marketplace. The market didn't change much from 2010 to 2020. Really started heating up probably 2017, 2018, 2019. But for 7 to 10 years, rates were about the same. The demand was about the same. Supply was about the same. Like everything was pretty stagnant, not stagnant, steady and predictable during that time. So you could be more proactive in how do I get ahead in this steady, predictable market. Dude, then COVID happens and nothing's been steady. Nothing has been consistent for the past 6 years. Like it's almost, it's comical. You think about it and you look at it. Dude, imagine getting into real estate in 2020 and all of a sudden COVID happens. They shut down your ability to evict tenants, right? Like you can't evict anybody for 15 months, 18 months. If you're buying a value-add apartment building or any property and you have tenants in there who aren't paying rent and you can't legally get rid of them for 15 months, which means you can't renovate it for 15 months, which means you can't, it kicks everything down the road a year and a half and messes up your timelines. Then supply chain gets screwed up. Then interest rates start changing in 2022, and we've had the steepest incline of interest rates in the history of the Federal Reserve. We have labor pricing because they print $10 trillion in a matter of 2 years, right? Like now there's this massive inflation where everything's more expensive, labor's more expensive, supplies are more expensive, utilities are more expensive, everything goes through the roof. There's a bunch of crazy storms that happened in 2020, 2021, 2022 that just tore through the insurance world and everybody's premium skyrocketed. So it's like it's been nothing but inconsistencies over the past 6 years. And so it's been a lot more reactive and responsive to things, I would say, at this time. And what I would say, man, is like you just got to control what you can control, right? Control the controllables, right? There's a lot of adversities that we all get faced with, and there's a lot of arrows that get thrown at us. Life isn't determined based on what happens to you. Life is determined based on how you respond to what happens to you. And if you can respond better and control the things that are within your control, right? Hey, I can't control interest rates, but I can control how I raise money. I can control maybe getting some seller financing and negotiate better terms on the sale. Maybe I pay my investors a 10% return, but I only pay 5% as we go, and I let the other 5% accrue and pay them back whenever we refinance or sell in the future, right? And it made us really, really sharp in a lot of those ways of structuring deals, raising money, and refining our operations. And we've tightened up like crazy to the point where we can now take our systems and our processes, put it into our software, and build a business that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars today.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned like the different periods in time where you had this 2010 to 2020, which is a very stabilized period. And really there, it's really about like refining and really scaling your operations, and then also figuring out like what strategies do you want to approach the market with, and constantly thinking about your strategy. But now, kind of like in this period post-COVID, in this very unstable period where nimbleness is probably more important than ever. Like you being able and being really comfortable about switching strategies, switching gears, thinking about things very, very maybe like high risk takers, like a high risk, much more high risk than before, is what you need to be very, very comfortable with. That's kind of what
I think there's still ways to mitigate. Yeah, I think there's still ways to mitigate the risk. I think what's gotten a lot of people in trouble over the past 5 years is like they're not checking their ego at the door, right? They're doing deals just because somebody's chirping in their ear saying, hey, take my money, take my money. And you hear that enough times, you're like, all right, well, let me go and find a deal and pencil it out. Dude, if anybody penciled a deal that showed property taxes increasing by 26% over the past 5 years like they have, along with insurance premiums doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling, especially in the Gulf Coast area and coastal Carolina area, if they penciled a deal that showed labor cost increasing by 20%, material costs increasing by over 40%, energy costs increasing by 50%, all these other things, and rents being stagnant for 4 or 5 years, dude, no deal would have been done, right? No deal would have been done. So I know what's his name? Brandon Turner's taking some heat because he had a deal that had to sell, and in order to do that, and his investors lost like $15 million, right? I don't know Brandon personally. I know of him, and but I know what he's going through, right? There's when you have that many people hitting you up to give you money, and yeah, you underwrite it in a few different. I know publicly traded commercial real estate investment companies in New York City, right? Publicly traded firms. I know the executive team. I know the CFO of one of these companies, and they have entire floors of analysts looking at every single variable that could change as they underwrite and give loans, and as they underwrite and invest in themselves. And guess what? They didn't see this coming, right? Nobody could have calculated all these adversities happening at the exact same time. And so there's a lot of tough decisions you need to make. And you really need to check your ego by doing this and say, hey, does this deal make sense to pursue? Or if I liquidate it and I take a loss, can I make my investors whole on the next deal? Or can I put my energy and my positive mindset towards solving productive problems as opposed to this one, which is just a sinking ship? And that's a really hard position to be in, man. It's really, really tough for people to then navigate that, check their ego, especially someone like Brandon, who's got a lot of public eyeballs. And it's a tough spot to be in, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's highly respectable, in the industry. He is one of the folks that is very transparent. He talks about what he does and how he's building things and why he started the business that he does. And he's quite honest about it. But I think you're absolutely right that it's, in many cases, no one saw what's coming. No one saw it coming. And he, unfortunately, is just so public that he gets flamed for some of these things. But it's happening.
Oh, dude, it's happening all they say, hey, there's blood in the streets. Dude, it's a murder scene behind closed doors right now. It is over and over and over. I know a $2 billion debt fund that's just being clobbered right now, right? I know multiple people who have given back properties to the bank, multiple people who have sold for massive losses and wiped out all their investor equity. It's been really, really bad. It's amazing that there's not more publicity about it. Fortunately, thank the Lord that our business, we kind of hit the wave of apartments before it kind of became cool, and we refinanced a lot of our properties back in 2020, 2021, and early 2022. And I was only stuck with one variable rate loan and a couple of bridge loans, but they were fixed rate, thankfully. And it's still navigating some tough variables, but fortunately, we haven't given any properties back. We haven't lost any investor money, but there's definitely some deals where we had to pause preferred returns. There's definitely deals where we were hoping to be out of it by now, and we're probably going to have to hold it for another 3 or 4 years in order for the market to kind of come back a little bit, rents to start boosting up, and hopefully rates come down. But that's the beauty of multifamily or of any rental properties. You can hold it long term, and eventually you pay down enough principal. Eventually those 2, 3, 4% annual rent increases compound, and you find yourself in 5, 10, 15 years with some spread, and your head's back above water, and now you have some options in order to exit. I think that's a key thing to understand in owning rental real estate is you got to have time on your side. Don't back yourself into a corner and be in a position where you have to return capital or there's a maturity on your loan. You have to give yourself 10 years of timeline at least because of these crazy variables that can be thrown at you. And if you took a look at 2006, at the peak of the market and going through the greatest recession real estate's ever felt, by 2016, values were higher again. So if you had a 10-year loan term, and as long as you didn't have to sell, but a lot of people got 5-year loan terms, and they had to sell in 2011, and then they took a bath because that was the bottom of the market. But if you have a 10-year term, usually the cycle comes back in that amount of time. And so if you can hold on for another 3, 4, 5 years, that's the play for sure. And that's where I think a lot of people are making bad moves right now in the rental real estate world, is they're making bad long-term decisions based on short-term circumstances, right? They're making permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances, and I think that's a naive thing to do.
Yeah. As you were going through this, are you still net growing your portfolio, or are you kind of trading off some of the poorer units and kind of reallocating kind of your portfolio to kind of position itself for when things kind of pick up that you're in a good place?
Yeah, great question. It's part of that growth process, that graduation process, right? I think just like Jack Welch at GE came in a couple times to his staff and quantified everybody and said, hey, who's performing, who's not performing? And he took the bottom 10% of his staff. I think he only did it twice, but it's like very well, like people think he did it every single year. But he took the bottom 10% of his staff and said, hey, all the 1 out of 10s, we got to get rid of them. And then we're going to backfill it, right? You don't just get rid of that because the 90% that's left, you're going to have the 80-20 rule on that as well, right? Or the 90-10 rule on that. So he just got rid of all the 1 out of 10s, and then he backfilled it with all new employees. And just by chance, there was a 6 out of 10 that came in. There was a 3 out of 10 that came in. There was a 10 out of 10. There was an 8 out of 10, right? And he had some really, really great employees that removed the 1 out of 10s. And he did it another few years later and tightened up the ship even more. And I think we should be doing that with our rental portfolios too. Taking a look at your portfolio and objectively saying, hey, which ones perform the best, right? Which ones have the best ROI? Which ones have are the easiest? Which ones have the least amount of headaches, the least amount of phone calls, the least amount of brain damage, right? Which ones have the least amount of risk? Which ones have balloons coming due on the loans versus long-term, fully amortized for 20 or 30 years, right? And looking at all these different variables and which ones are out of state, which ones are in state, which ones are in my backyard, they're easier to manage versus the ones I have to get a hotel and an airplane flight and all this other stuff. Figuring out what that looks like and trimming out the bottom 10 or 20% of your portfolio every year and then backfilling it with other properties, right? If you trim out the bottom 20% of your portfolio and you get rid of all the 1 and 2 out of 10 properties and you fill it back up with good properties, guess what? Now you're going to get some 8 out of 10s. You might get a 10 out of 10 property that comes into your portfolio. And I think we should be doing that on a consistent basis. Every few years, trimming your portfolio, selling off some stuff, bringing some cash back, which is always helpful. And then, dude, we're operators. We know how to go and find deals and source properties and negotiate. We can turn on that switch at any time and go and acquire more properties. So I've been in a net sale because I've been refining my portfolio to just Ohio and the Carolinas, which is where my team and I are located. And so I was in 12 different states, and it was just spread too thin. I didn't like it. And so I've been refining in that regard, but we have acquired some other properties in Ohio and in the Carolinas over the past couple of years, just not as much as what we've been selling off. And then the other thing that I would say is I have another huge opportunity, which is my property management software. And this is already has a 9-figure valuation on it. And that has the highest potential of anything that can generate more revenue and more income for me. And it's easy, and it's very lucrative, and it's fun, and it's just we don't have debt or anything like that, right? And so it's a nice change of pace. But I'll tell you what, if I didn't have that, I would be on a buying spree right now. I think there are a lot of good deals. There's a lot of very beat up and battered operators out there that you can go and step in for very minimal amount of money and say, hey, Gil, like you're having a tough time on AB 123 Main Street, and I'll tell you what, you need about $500,000. I'll bring the cash in order to restabilize this apartment complex, but I need full control. We're going to leave your investor money in on it. We're going to leave your loan in on it. I'm going to step in and just inject them cash. It might only be 5% or 2% or 10% of the money needed. It allows me to get into deals that I couldn't get into with that little amount of money, but allows me to now control it and then to strike some sort of deal that says, hey, I'm going to pay you this amount of this price and 30% of any of the profit above it. So it gives you an exit strategy and your investors a chance to still make some money long term, but it kind of resets the clock for you. It allows me to get into a deal for less money than I could get into otherwise, and I can typically get into some pretty good deals, nice properties in nice areas, right? That we can come in and tighten up operations on, and then have 3, 5, 10 years in order to then reposition it and see where the market turns. So yeah. I do think there's some really good opportunities right now. I think all of us need a tighter buy box, though. Just have a very clear, defined buy box. I'm only going to buy in this state or this zip code or this city, this class of property, this certain size, this occupancy level, this whatever it is. Having clarity around that is going to help you make better decisions.
Yeah, and I'm seeing something similar on the short-term rental side where maybe it's a different pace. I think on the commercial side, it's painful right now because back in kind of the COVID days, the interest rates like went haywire, where you had a lot of commercial loans that were on variable fixed rates, and the rates went sky high there. So and that's where a lot of the margins are being squeezed out of, where a lot of these units are no longer making any money. It's because of the variable rate. On the short-term rental side,
what I would say is commercial properties are valued based on the income approach. So it's just income minus expenses equals net operating income. And so the income's been flat for the past 4 years. We got a big jump in 2020, 21, but it's been flat from 22 to 26. So you're not getting the growth there. And then all the expenses have increased by at least 30%, right? And so your NOI is dramatically less. If interest rates would have stayed the same and cap rates would have stayed the same, you're still at best break even, if not still underwater a little bit. But because interest rates dictate the multiple, right, the cap rate that you get on these apartment complexes, and those interest rates going up, it handcuffs all these operators with zero exit strategy. So now you can't sell it, you can't refinance it, you have to cash flow it. But if you have a variable rate loan, to your point, dude, it sucks up all the cash flow and some, and then you're feeding this thing, and then eventually you get to a point where you're like, dude, I can't throw good money after bad. I got to dump this, So, yes, to your point, I just want to add a little bit additional color to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
What's going on the short-term side, though?
So, like on the short-term side, I think a lot of folks got into short-term rentals in kind of the COVID days, like the golden years of 2021, 23. Like those were like the really golden years of getting into it, where you could purchase anything and you would be able to put it up and get some pretty decent revenue coming from it. However, you got this big wave where the market has matured quite a bit. A lot of folks are using much more sophisticated systems. They have better operations now. You're not having these like really cookie cutter properties out there. A lot of the ones that are really being successful are the ones that are well designed, but now the bar is being raised so high. And now with all the instability, travel is less. At least I've seen this across the board. Like I talked to lots and lots of property managers, and some say the market's doing the same thing as last year, but across the board, I'm seeing quite a bit of drop in revenue across wide portfolios here. I think that the one thing that you mentioned is really like having time on your side. And I think a lot of folks in the last 18 months, time was not on their side, and they had to figure out, do I sell? And almost everybody that bought and sold has lost all their money in the deal, where they pretty much didn't make anything, and hopefully they didn't lose anything either, but they're having to go at loss. But I think the ones that are really in a cash positive position, their cash flows are net neutral, they're able to hold on to it. And like what I've seen is, and kind of the smarter folks I've seen is like the folks holding on to their properties, maybe selling off or exchanging off the properties that aren't doing well into better performing ones. But it's really a defense game right now, and really trying to get time on your side to get to that 2, 3, and hopefully not 4-year time frame for the market to kind of pick back up.
Yep. I mean, that's what's happening with any rental property. If you can keep your head above water, there's no reason to cement a loss unless it's a massive drain on your resources. If you're feeding this property, if it's taking up 80% of your time, you're negative all the time, you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're super stressed. Yeah, you can sell it, take the loss, and then go put your energy someplace else where it's positive. I do think that there is some value to that. But if it's like, hey, dude, it is what it is. We're not getting rich off of it, but we're not losing any money. It kind of manages itself, or it's very simple to manage with just a couple hours a week. Dude, it doesn't make sense to sell and cement a loss, right? If you sell right now and you lose somebody's money, or you lose your own money, dude, it's stuck. It's concrete, right? It's gone forever. Versus, dude, just let it ride out. Like let it ride for a little bit longer. See how that looks. Make a decision 12 months from now, 24 months from now, 36 months from now. But don't make bad, permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances.
Yeah, I think that the big difference is we've had a lot of investors that have their normal W-2, and they're not institutionalized investors. They maybe had a couple $100,000 to be able to buy a property out there, but they're not scaling. And they probably got into it for the bonus depreciation against their W-2s, and that's why they got into short-term rentals. But they never intended to be in like operators themselves, and they figured out like, oh shoot, I bought a short-term rental. It's not like a long-term rental. I could put a property management income in place. I have to manage this. And I think the folks that are burned out, that don't enjoy hospitality, those are the ones like, I don't know if this is worth it. Like I'm barely cash flowing. I'm definitely not making as much as the golden years. Maybe I just let this go and I'll go back to my W-2. And because they're probably high income earners, they did this for tax reasons. They're like, okay, I'm going to redeploy this somewhere else. But I think like I've seen a lot where they're selling at a loss. Like I wish you just held on to it, because 2-3 years from now, it would make such a big difference.
I mean, if you look at any bubble, every bubble starts out and ends the same way, right? Like it starts out with people who are in the industry, having a lot of success, making a lot of money. A bunch of outsiders see them making that much money. They then leave their primary business, primary job, start jumping into that industry, right? There's a huge movement into whatever that bubble is. It pushes prices up, it pushes values up. The people who are the latecomers, and almost everybody always jumps into pretty much every bubble, right? And even the naysayers and people who don't want to be involved, eventually there's 2 or 3 or 4 years of positive growth, and all this people like, dang, I better go and buy. But they're buying at the peak, right? And then even the most pessimistic people come in, and then when they get in, they're at the peak, and then all of a sudden either a market condition changes, or the smart people are like, I've never seen in 20 years of being in business values get this high. I better start liquidating right now. And it creates this snowball effect. They start liquidating, all the values start dropping, everybody else starts liquidating, and then everybody's stuck just, when the music stops, who's holding the bag, right? And that's every single bubble, every single time, man. And it happened in multifamily, it happened in cryptocurrency, it happened in e-commerce stores, it's happened in short-term rentals, it's going to happen in the trades, right, and all the blue-collar space with all that stuff that's going on right now. It's going to happen in self-storage. It's already starting to happen in some self-storage stuff. Like, it happens in every single industry, regardless, right? It happened in tech. It happened in the .com. It happened in with dandelions or daffodils, whatever the hell, tulips in the Netherlands 400 years ago, right? Like, the same cycle happens over and over and over again. Dude, the smartest thing anybody can do is just stay in their lane. Keep their head down. Don't look left. Don't look right. Print money, and then go and invest passively with, or partner up with somebody who is a full-time expert in whatever that industry is. But usually, man, when you, like, think about this. There's books written on this and scientific studies on this, but it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at any subject, right? What's the book by Malcolm Gladwell? I can't remember. Blink. And he says, like, there's multiple studies about this. Like, you have to spend 10,000 hours at something in order to then become an expert, right? So you're just learning the first 10,000 hours. And if you do the math on that, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year is only 2,000 hours in a single year. So you have to be full-time in something for 5 years before you're ever an expert at it. You're still learning all those things. And you still learn after you're an expert, right? Based on some of these variables that change in the market conditions. And so, like, you have to dedicate minimum that much time if you're going to get into anything. And if you're not going to dedicate that much time, then you need to partner with somebody who has spent that much time in that industry. So that way you have arms linked with somebody who knows what the heck they're doing, and they can't, get moved around by these market cycles the way that everybody else has as newbies into any industry.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good segue also to talk about some of the things that you've been doing on your portfolio into like the short-term rental side of things. You teased upon it a little bit at the beginning of the show, where you mentioned that you have repurposed a significant amount of your inventory towards the short-term rental side. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the thinking behind that and what you're seeing now. I mean,
this could be a huge opportunity for like your listeners and finding some great deals, great opportunities, ways to generate a lot of additional cash and cash flow, or get equity into some larger projects. But one of the things that we've done in our portfolio, for instance, is, as I mentioned before, income's been flat, right? Now we're starting to see a little bit of growth, rent, and I think we're going to see some rent growth over the course of the next consistently over the next 4 or 5 years. But even then, man, we're still taking arrows. We've tightened up expenses, but you can only do so much in order to reduce expenses. So you really need to start looking at ways to generate additional revenue. And one of the things that we've done is we've taken a certain allocation of units at our apartment buildings. So let's say we have a 100-unit apartment building. We usually take about 5% of the units at any given property. You usually can't do more than that because the lender doesn't want to see more than that done. Sometimes you can get up to 10%. But usually it creates some issues on the financing side of things for multifamily owners if they have all their revenue coming from a single stream. So anyways, we take about 5% of our units, and guess what? We just clean them up, make them a little bit nicer and a little bit more aesthetic, and then we add a bunch of furnishings, and we put them on Airbnb and VRBO, and we do our own reach out in the different community, Facebook groups, local influencers, local publications, Furnished Finder, all those things. And we offer a couple different forms of rent. One, you can come in and you can rent a regular apartment, or you can rent a furnished apartment on a 12-month term, right? And it costs us $5,000 or $6,000 to furnish a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, but we get an extra $400 a month. So we make all of our money back within 12 months on just that. Then we're doing some short-term stuff, or midterm. And so we'll do midterm rentals, and we'll charge about an extra $800 per unit per month. So we make all of our money back in about 6 months on those, but they only commit to 6 months. But it gets us further ahead. And then we have a handful of them that are short-term rentals that we get licensed with the local community or local municipality, and we make them short-term rentals. And we generate about 2 to 3 times the amount of rental revenue that we would on an annual lease by doing short-term rentals. And so that allows us as multifamily owners to substantially boost the cash flow at that property. And it also can be a big opportunity for people like who are experts in the short-term rental space to go to these landlords, right? Like, not everybody has the team built out like I do, or has the willingness, ambition, creativity to attack it in this way that I do. And there's plenty of operators out there where you can just go knock on doors of people who've been taking arrows for the past 4 or 5 years and say, hey, I'm willing to come in and lease 5% of your units, and then you go in there and do a rental arbitrage play, right? You go in there, you furnish all these things, sign a 5-year lease with that landlord. They would love to see that, to not have to be chasing rent and worried about move-outs and turnover and everything else, and just allow somebody else to come in and ensure that those units stay occupied. They're getting cleaned on a regular basis, and there's a lot of benefits to that. And you can make a lot of money. Call it $1,000 to $3,000 per unit per month times 5, 6, 10, 15, 50 units. Turns into a substantial cash flow play for somebody looking for that. The other option would be, hey, let me come in and help you out with furnishing some things and handling furnished rentals, midterm rentals, short-term rentals, generating additional revenue, and we just do some sort of an equity split, cash flow split, or let me vest into some equity in the actual ownership of the apartment building. Like, there's a lot of creative ways to do that where you can get and utilize your experience and for somebody else's adversities that they're facing right now, help solve a problem for them, help solve a problem for you, and rising tide floats all boats and creates a great benefit for everyone.
Yeah, and I think the one point that you mentioned is like almost like the psychology of the people, like the people that you're trying to reach out to. A lot of these apartment owners are in a tight bind where, as we spoke earlier, they need to buy time for the next 3 to 5 years. And so if you're going to be able to come in there and you say, okay, I'm going to help you secure at least for the 5% units that you can rent out, or if more, even better. But we're going to help you secure this, and that will give them some stability in this one so that they can move on and not have to worry about it. And I think that's like almost a reframing, because I think like some investors and some short-term rental operators, they think about kind of like optimizing for other things. But here, like, there's an opportunity where there's a demand for it, there's a need for it from the apartment owner's standpoint, and you also have a skill set that aligns very, very well with it. And I like how you mentioned, like, it's not just one tactic of doing rental arbitrage, but you can take an equity stake into it and become an operator in the business and take equity back into it. Yep.
I mean, I think it's a huge, ripe for the taking and great opportunity for anybody who has the ambitions to scale in a climate that's pretty tough, right? Like you don't have to sign on any loans in that regard. You don't have to raise any capital, maybe to furnish some of these units. But if you've got a great credit card or an Amex or something with no limit, like there's other ways to fund that. And there's a desperate need, right? There's like you would be a knight in shining armor knocking on the door of one of these multifamily owners saying, hey, let me increase your rental revenue by X% on, by 100% on these 5, 10, 15 units that you've got over here. And creates a win-win situation for everybody. And how many of those conversations can you have? Like literally limitless.
Yeah. Tim, we usually ask 3 questions, but I know we're tight on time. I'm going to ask you one specific one. What's one piece of mindset advice that you would give to someone that's starting something completely new?
Love that question. I would say, going back to like when I was getting started, people say, hey, I don't have the time, and so they don't ever go and pursue something new. I don't have the money, so they don't go and pursue something new. I don't have the knowledge. I don't go and by doing that, it's saying, hey, I don't have the resources. Well, like, guess what? If you're resourceful, if you know how to go out and find the resources, like resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. And so I would put myself in a position where I'm asking myself questions. How can I? Right? Empowering type questions. How could I do this? How could I solve that problem? How can I find the money? How could I get the additional time? How could I learn? Right? Like, and there's answers to those questions that are very efficient ways to gain access to knowledge, time, resources, money, all those things. But you got to be resourceful, right? And you have to focus on the resourcefulness first. And if you're resourceful and you approach every problem and every question with resourcefulness, you will find the resources and you will be able to solve a lot of problems and create this awesome momentum that positions you for big success down the road. And then you just got to let it compound, right? It's just like there's no secret. It's consistency and time. Consistency plus time. And all of a sudden, man, you're the best three-point shooter in the NBA. You're the best soccer player in FIFA, right? Like you're the best in the entire world at that thing just by doing more of it for a longer period of time than anybody else. That's the secret. That's all you got to do is just stay consistent over a long period of time and don't let yourself get rocked by certain different questions. Have the resourcefulness.
I love that. Tim, it was a huge pleasure to have you on and have you just walk us through what you've seen kind of throughout the last decade and a half, 2 decades of real estate, and kind of what you're seeing, and kind of like almost a call to action too to some of our operators here to see if there's an opportunity to partner up on the long-term commercial side and bring in the hospitality experience.
100%, man. I think it's a huge opportunity right now. I think it's a great way that you can get involved in some really, really good deals without any risk, or with very limited risk, without any money or very limited money out of pocket. And I think it's going to be would create a huge win for both the short-term rental operator and the multifamily operator. So go and knock on some doors, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. See you later. Bye.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.